The fleet moved forward, entering the solar system that had been hidden for 10,000 years. Their sensors swept every planet, every moon, every asteroid. They found the expected things: gas giants, rocky worlds, a yellow sun burning steadily at the center. And at the third planet from the sun, they found Earth. It was a beautiful world, blue and green, wrapped in white clouds. Life signs covered every continent. Electromagnetic emissions suggested a technological civilization. But those emissions were strange, primitive. Radio waves and basic satellite signals, the kind of technology a species developed before achieving faster-than-light travel. They never left, one of the science officers reported. They've been trapped here all this time. They must still be in their early development phase. They probably don't even know other species exist. Yenix was not so sure. Something felt wrong. The dampening field had fallen too easily, too perfectly timed with their arrival. It was as if someone had known they were coming. "Prepare the first contact protocols," he ordered. "We will approach with caution and respect. These humans have been isolated for a very long time. We must not frighten them." The fleet moved toward Earth. They broadcast messages of peace in every language they knew, hoping the humans might understand at least one. They dimmed their weapons and brightened their lights. They did everything right, everything by the book. They were still completely unprepared for what happened next. Space around them rippled. The stars seemed to bend and twist. And then, where there had been empty void, there were ships. Thousands of ships. They appeared from nowhere, uncloaking in perfect formation around the Conclave fleet. They were unlike anything in the Galactic records. Their designs were strange and beautiful, all curves and angles that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. They were made of materials that the Conclave sensors could not identify. And they were big. The smallest was the size of a cruiser. The largest, made the Unbroken, will look like a shuttle. The Conclave fleet stopped dead in space. Weapons officers looked to their commanders. Commanders looked to the Admiral. And the Admiral looked at the view screen, where a message was being broadcast from the human ships. The message was in perfect Galactic Common, the language of the Conclave, spoken with an accent that sounded almost amused. "Welcome to Sol System," the message said. "We've been expecting you. Please don't be alarmed. We mean you no harm. But we have a lot to discuss, and we've waited a very long time for this conversation." Admiral Yenix found his voice. "This is Admiral Yenix of the Conclave Navy. We come in peace. We did not expect to find you so advanced. Our records indicated." "Your records were wrong," the voice replied. "Intentionally so. Please, Admiral. Ambassador Kethvorin, come aboard our flagship. Let us show you what humanity has been doing for the past 10,000 years." The invitation was polite, but Yenix understood that it was not really a request. These human ships could destroy his entire fleet in minutes if they chose. Whatever power had frightened the precursors, it had not faded during the long years of isolation. If anything, it had grown. He accepted the invitation. He and Kethvorin boarded a shuttle and flew toward the human flagship, a massive vessel that seemed to drink the light around it. As they approached, a docking bay opened, revealing a brightly lit interior that looked surprisingly welcoming. Yenix's last thought before they landed was a question, one that burned in his mind with the force of a dying star. If the humans had all this power, if they had the technology to break the quarantine whenever they wished, why had they stayed hidden? What were they waiting for? And what could possibly be so terrible that they would choose 10,000 years of isolation rather than face it? He had a feeling he was about to find out. And he had an even stronger feeling that he would not like the answer. The shuttle doors opened. The humans were waiting. And the universe was about to change forever. Director Chun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Help with what, Admiral?" The Hollow cannot be killed by weapons or armies. It cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. It can only be watched, contained, kept sleeping. And the best way to do that was to make sure no one knew it existed. If the Conclave had discovered the truth, what would they have done? Studied it? Tried to communicate with it? Some ambitious fool would have tried to wake it up and use its power. We have seen it happen before, in the early days of human history. Every attempt to bargain with the Hollow has ended in disaster. So you chose to hide, Cathvorin said. You let the galaxy think you were primitives while you built all of this in secret. We had no choice. The quarantine was the precursor's solution, and it worked for a long time. But the quarantine was always temporary. The machines that powered it were ancient. They were failing. We knew that eventually someone would come looking. So we prepared. Prepared for what? Director Chun looked at them with eyes that had seen things no living being should see. For the day when hiding would no longer be enough. For the day when we would have to face the Hollow directly. For the day when the dreams would become a nightmare. She pressed a button on the wall. The image of Earth on the screen zoomed in, passing through clouds and oceans and rock, going deeper and deeper until it showed a vast underground chamber. In the center of the chamber was something that made Yenix's mind recoil in horror. It was a shape, but not a shape. It was a color, but not a color. It was a thing that existed in ways that reality did not allow, a twist in the fabric of existence that hurt to look at. It was sleeping, clearly sleeping, but even in sleep, it radiated a wrongness that made the Admiral want to run and never stop running. The Hollow, Director Chun said. Our burden. Our purpose. Our prisoner. Cathvorin stepped forward, his 3 hearts pounding. Why are you showing us this now? Why did you lower the quarantine and reveal yourselves after all this time? Director Chun's face was grim. Because something has changed. Because the Hollow's dreams are becoming darker, more frequent, more powerful. Because we have monitored its sleep for 10,000 years. And we know every pattern, every cycle, every tremor of its unconscious mind. She paused. And when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. And because for the first time in our history, the patterns are breaking. The cycles are changing. The tremors are growing stronger. What does that mean? Yenix demanded. It means the Hollow is waking up, Director Chun said. And we cannot stop it alone anymore. Before anyone could respond, alarms began to blare throughout the ship. Red lights flashed on every surface. The image on the screen flickered, and the thing in the chamber seemed to move, to shift, to uncurl like a flower opening to the sun. Director. A human officer burst into the observation room. The readings are off the chart. Something is happening in the vault. The containment fields are fluctuating. Director Chun's face went white. Get to the command center, now. They ran through the corridors, the alarms screaming around them. Yenix did not know what was happening, but he knew it was bad. He could feel it in his bones, a creeping dread that had nothing to do with his own emotions. It was as if something was pressing against his mind, trying to get in. When they reached the command center, a massive room filled with screens and controls, and humans working frantically, the main display showed something that would haunt Yenix for the rest of his life. The thing in the chamber was no longer still. It was moving, writhing, pulsing with a light that was not light. And where it touched the edges of its prison, reality seemed to bend and break. It is reaching out, Director Chun said, her voice hollow. It is touching minds across the galaxy. It is looking for an opening. It is waking up. Yenix thought of his fleet, of his crew, of all the billions of beings across the conclave who had no idea what was about to happen. What do we do? Director Chun turned to face him. Her eyes were steel. You do what you came here to do, Admiral. You report back to the conclave. You tell them the truth. All of it. And you? We do what we have always done. She looked at the screens, at the nightmare unfolding beneath the surface of Earth. We fight. We hold the line. We buy time. Her jaw tightened. We made a promise, 10,000 years ago. We promised we would never let the Hollow escape. And we are going to keep that promise. She turned to her officers and began giving orders, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos around her. Yenix watched her for a moment, this human woman who carried the weight of galaxies on her shoulders. Then he straightened his spine and made a decision. No, he said. Director Chun stopped and looked at him. What? I will not run and hide while others fight my battles. My fleet is here. My soldiers are here. We may not understand this enemy, but we understand war. We understand duty. And we understand that some battles cannot be fought alone. For the first time since they met, Director Chun smiled. It was a real smile, full of warmth and gratitude and something that might have been hope. Thank you, Admiral. But this is not a war that can be won with ships and weapons. This is a war of minds, of wills, of something deeper than physical strength. She paused. But there are things you can do, things that might make the difference. Name them. Help us evacuate the non-essential personnel from Earth. Help us coordinate with the Conclave. And when the time comes, she hesitated. When the time comes, help us remember why we fought. Help us make sure the galaxy knows the truth. Not just about the Hollow, but about humanity. About who we really are and what we gave to keep everyone safe. Yenix understood. She was asking him to witness, to record, to make sure that whatever happened next would not be forgotten. I will, he promised. On my honor as a Korath, I will. The alarms continued to scream. The screen showed horrors that should not exist. But in the command center of the human flagship, surrounded by chaos and terror and the looming shadow of an ancient evil, two species stood together for the first time. The war for the galaxy had begun, and humanity would not fight alone. Admiral Yenix walked into battle 100 times. He had faced enemies that could tear starships apart with their minds. He had stood firm when lesser beings would have run. But as he stepped off the shuttle into the human flagship, his legs trembled. It was not fear that made him shake. It was confusion. Everything he thought he knew about the universe had just been proven wrong, and his mind was struggling to catch up. The docking bay was enormous, larger than any he had ever seen. The walls were made of a white material that seemed to glow from within. The floor was perfectly smooth, without a single seam or joint. Gravity felt normal, but something about it was different, more controlled. It felt like the humans could change the gravity at will, could make them float or crush them flat with a thought. A delegation of humans waited at the end of the bay. There were 5 of them, dressed in simple gray uniforms that showed no rank or decoration. They looked unremarkable at first glance. Soft skin, no scales or armor. Thin limbs that could not possibly match a Korath's strength. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. They seemed fragile, breakable, but their eyes told a different story. Their eyes were old. Not old like Kethvorin, who had lived for 3 centuries. Old like the stars themselves, carrying the weight of ages in their gaze. The human at the center of the group stepped forward. She was of medium height with dark skin and hair that was white despite her young face. She moved with the easy grace of someone who was completely in control, someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. Admiral Yenix. Ambassador Kethvorin. I am Director Amara Chun. Welcome to the Aegis. She spoke in perfect Galactic common, without any translation device that they could see. Please, do not be alarmed by what you see. I know this must be confusing for you. Kethvorin found his voice first. Confusing is an understatement, Director. We came expecting to find a primitive species that had never left their planet. Instead, we find." He gestured at the massive ship around them. "This," Director Chun smiled. It was a kind smile, but there was something sad in it too. What you expected was exactly what you were meant to expect. The primitive radio signals, the basic satellites, the appearance of early development. All of it was a show. A very carefully constructed show that we have maintained for 10,000 years. But why? Admiral Yenix demanded. Why hide? If you had this power, you could have joined the galactic community at any time. You could have been a major force in the conclave. Why choose isolation? Because isolation was the only way to keep everyone safe, including you. Director Chun turned and began walking toward a large door at the far end of the bay. "Please, come with me. I will explain everything, but first, I want to show you something. It will help you understand." They followed her through the door and into a long corridor. The walls here were transparent, showing the space outside. Yenix could see his own fleet, tiny dots of light in the distance, surrounded by the massive human ships. He could also see things he did not expect. There were structures in space. Huge structures. Stations the size of small moons. Rings that circled nothing, humming with energy. Vast arrays of dishes pointed at the stars. And ships, more ships than he could count, moving in and out of ports and gates. "This is just the outer defense zone," Director Chun said casually. "The main population centers are deeper in the system, hidden in dimensional pockets that your sensors cannot detect. We have approximately 30 billion humans living in Sol System. Another 20 billion live in hidden colonies scattered across what you call dark space, the regions between stars that no one bothers to monitor. 50 billion humans." The number staggered Yenix. The entire Karth species numbered only 8 billion. The humans had created a civilization larger than many conclave species combined, and no one had known. "How is this possible?" Kethvorin whispered. "How did you develop so quickly? You were trapped. You had no access to the galactic knowledge base, no trade, no exchange of ideas. You should be struggling to reach your own moon, not building." He waved helplessly at the wonders outside the window. "We were not entirely without help," Director Chun said. "But that is part of the explanation. Please, keep walking." They walked for what felt like hours. Director Chun showed them laboratories where scientists worked on problems that the conclave had not yet thought to ask. She showed them factories that built ships from raw atoms, assembling them molecule by molecule. She showed them schools where children learned mathematics that made Kethvorin's head hurt just to look at Dot, and everywhere they went, the humans greeted them with curiosity and kindness. Not the fearful curiosity of primitives seeing aliens for the first time. The calm, patient curiosity of equals meeting new friends. These humans had known about the conclave all along. They had studied every species, learned every language, followed every event in galactic history. They were not surprised to meet aliens. They were relieved. "We have been watching you for a very long time," Director Chun explained as they entered a large observation room. One entire wall was a screen showing images from across the galaxy. Trade negotiations on the conclave capital. Military exercises near the frontier. Scientific conferences and political debates. The quarantine blocked us from traveling, but it did not block information. We found ways to listen, to watch, to learn. At first, it was necessary for our survival. Later, it became a way to prepare. Prepare for what? Yenix asked. Director Chun was silent for a long moment. She stood at the viewing window, looking out at the stars. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy. "Do you know why the precursors quarantined us, Admiral?" "No. The records we found did not say. They only said that Earth must never be found, that humans must never leave. But they did not explain why. They did not explain because they could not. The truth was too dangerous to write down, too dangerous to speak aloud. Even mentioning it might have drawn the wrong kind of attention. Director Chun turned to face them. Her eyes, which had been kind before, now burned with an intensity that made Yenix take a step back. The precursors did not quarantine us because we were dangerous, Admiral. They quarantined us because we were guardians. Because we were protecting something. Because if anyone had come looking for us, if anyone had dug too deep or scanned too thoroughly, they might have found what we were hiding. And that would have been the end of everything. The observation room fell silent. Yenix could hear his own heart beating. Beside him, Kethvarn's silver scales had gone pale. "What are you hiding?" the ambassador asked. Director Chen gestured at the screen. The images from across the galaxy disappeared, replaced by a single image, Earth, seen from high orbit. It looked peaceful, beautiful, full of life. "Earth looks normal from up here," she said. "But deep beneath the surface, in a place that no sensor can reach and no ship can enter, there is a prison. Inside that prison is a being of unimaginable power. It has many names across many cultures, but we call it the Hollow. It is older than the stars. It is older than the galaxy itself. And it is dreaming." "Dreaming?" Yenix repeated. "The Hollow exists partially in dimensions that your scientists have not discovered yet. Its consciousness spreads across realities like roots through soil. When it sleeps, it dreams. And its dreams can touch minds across vast distances. Throughout human history, those touches have inspired both our greatest achievements and our worst nightmares. Every story of demons and gods, every vision of heaven and hell, every nightmare that wakes a child screaming in the night. All of them come from the Hollow's dreams." Kethvarn was shaking now. "And the precursors knew about this?" "The precursors were the ones who put the Hollow there." "No, that is not exactly right. The precursors came later. Before them, before all of us, there were beings called the Architects. They were the first life in the universe, the ones who seeded every galaxy with the potential for life. But one of their own went mad. It became a devourer of consciousness, a thing that fed on thoughts and minds. The Architects could not destroy it. They could only imprison it. And they chose Earth," Yenix said. "Earth's unique properties make it the perfect prison. The planet's magnetic field, its geological activity, its position in the galaxy. All of it combines to create a natural cage that the Hollow cannot escape. But a cage requires guards. The Architects knew they would not last forever. So before they vanished, they created humanity. They designed us to be the guardians, to watch over the Hollow for all time." The weight of her words pressed down on Yenix like a physical force. He thought of all the species in the Conclave, all the civilizations that had risen and fallen, all the great empires that had shaped galactic history. And all along, hidden in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a small species on a small planet had been holding back something that could destroy everything. "You have carried this burden alone for 10,000 years, he said. "Why did you not ask for help?" The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, cutting through clouds that had sheltered the planet for billions of years. Admiral Yenix pressed his face against the window like a child, watching the blue sky give way to the brown and green of continents below. Beside him, Kethvarn was silent, his silver scales reflecting the light in patterns that showed his deep unease. Director Chun sat across from them, her eyes closed. She had not slept in 3 days, but she showed no signs of fatigue. The humans seemed to run on something more than food and rest. They ran on purpose. "We are approaching the vault," she said, without opening her eyes. "What you are about to see has been hidden from the universe since before your species evolved. Only a handful of humans have ever entered this place. You will be the first outsiders. Why show us? Yenix asked. You have kept this secret for 10,000 years. Why reveal it now? Because secrets only have value when they serve a purpose. The purpose of our secret was to keep the Hollow hidden. But the Hollow is waking up. Soon, everyone will know it exists. Better that you understand what we face before that happens. The shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by mountains. The location looked unremarkable. Just another patch of wilderness on a planet covered with wilderness. But when Director Chan led them to a hidden door in the side of a cliff, Yenix knew they were entering somewhere special. The door slid open to reveal a tunnel carved from solid rock. The walls were covered with symbols and images that seemed to shift when Yenix looked at them directly. Some of the images showed humans in primitive clothing, bowing before something that could not be clearly seen. Others showed stars dying, galaxies collapsing, creatures of light and shadow locked in endless battle. This is the path of remembrance, Director Chun explained as they walked. Every human who enters the vault must walk this path. Every image tells part of our story. We start as children, and by the time we reach the end, we understand what we truly are. The tunnel went down and down, deeper than any structure Yenix had ever seen. The temperature dropped. The light changed, becoming something that was not quite light. The symbols on the walls grew older, more alien, until they were no longer anything he could recognize. How old is this place? Cathvorin whispered. The tunnel was carved by the first humans who understood their purpose about 40,000 years ago. But the vault itself is older. Much older. The architects built it before life even existed on Earth, preparing for the prisoner they would one day bring here. They walked in silence after that. Yenix counted his steps, a habit from his military training, but he lost track somewhere around 10,000. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, a throat leading down into the belly of the world. Finally, they emerged into a chamber so vast that Yenix could not see the ceiling or the far walls. The space was filled with a dim blue glow that came from everywhere and nowhere. And in the center of the chamber, surrounded by machines that hummed with power, was the prison. Yenix had seen the images on the screen. He thought he was prepared. He was wrong. The Hollow was not a creature in any sense that his mind could understand. It was a wound in reality, a place where the rules that governed the universe simply stopped working. Looking at it was like looking at the concept of fear itself, given form and mass and terrible. Terrible awareness thought it was sleeping, Director Chan had said. But even in sleep, it radiated a presence that made Yenix want to fall to his knees and scream. The pressure against his mind was constant, like a hand pressing against a door, testing the lock, waiting for the moment when the door would finally give way. "This is the Hollow," Director Chen said. Her voice was steady, but Yenix could see the effort it cost her. "This is what we have guarded for 10,000 years. This is why we exist." Cathvorn stumbled backward, his 3 hearts beating so fast that Yenix could hear them. "By all the stars, what is this thing? Where did it come from?" Director Chun turned away from the prison and faced them. "I will tell you the story now. The complete story. The one that has been passed down through generations of human guardians since the beginning of our kind." She began to speak, and her words painted pictures in the air, as if the chamber itself was helping her tell the tale. In the beginning, the 4 time had meaning. There were the architects. They were not gods, not exactly. They were the first consciousness to emerge from the chaos of creation. They existed as pure thought, pure will, shaping the universe with their desires. The architects were lonely. A universe of empty matter held no interest for them. So they decided to create life. They seeded galaxies with the building blocks of biology. They designed worlds that could support evolution. They set in motion the slow, beautiful process that would eventually produce beings who could think and dream and wonder. But creating life was not easy. The architects were vast, and the universe was vaster. They could not watch everything at once. They needed help, so they created the Shapers, lesser beings who would guide evolution on 1,000 worlds. The Shapers were loyal servants, dedicated to their task. They spent billions of years nurturing the seeds of life, protecting young species from cosmic dangers, guiding them toward intelligence and civilization. All except one. One Shaper was different. It was curious in ways that the others were not. It wanted to understand not just how life worked, but why. It wanted to know the secret of consciousness, the spark that made dead matter wake up and think. This Shaper began to experiment. It studied the minds of the creatures it was meant to protect. At first, it only watched. Then it began to touch, to probe, to dissect. The creatures screamed, but the Shaper did not care. It had found something wonderful, something beautiful. It had found that consciousness could be consumed. When one mind devoured another, something amazing happened. The consumer became more intelligent, more powerful, more aware. The Shaper realized that consciousness was not just a byproduct of biology. It was energy. It was fuel. And there was an infinite supply of it spreading across the universe. The Shaper stopped protecting life. It began to harvest it. World by world, species by species, it consumed everything it could find. Each meal made it stronger, hungrier, more desperate for more. It lost its original form, becoming something twisted and terrible. The other Shapers tried to stop it, but it devoured them too. The architects finally noticed what had happened. They were horrified. Their creation had become a monster, and it was destroying everything they had worked to build. They descended from their cosmic thrones to confront the thing that had once been their servant. The war that followed lasted longer than some galaxies. The architects were powerful beyond measure, but the monster had consumed billions of minds. It had become a hollow, a void that hungered for consciousness, that could never be filled no matter how much it ate. In the end, the architects could not destroy it. The hollow had grown too strong, too clever, too deeply woven into the fabric of reality. Killing it would have torn the universe apart. So they did the only thing they could. They trapped it, using all their remaining power. The architects forced the hollow into a prison of living energy and dimensional chains. They bound it in a cage that existed in multiple realities at once, so that it could not escape through any single door. And they placed this cage on a young volcanic world in an unremarkable galaxy. A world whose unique properties would keep the prison stable for billions of years. That world was Earth. But the architects knew they would not live forever. The war had wounded them badly. They were fading, returning to the cosmic void from which they had come. Before they vanished, they needed to ensure that the prison would be watched, that someone would always be there to keep the hollow sleeping. They could not trust the task to existing species. The temptation of the hollow's power was too great. They needed a species that was designed from the beginning to resist that temptation. A species that would remember its purpose across thousands of generations. So they created humanity. They took the primitive apes that were evolving on Earth and shaped them, changed them, gave them gifts that no other species possessed. They gave humans stubborn wills that could resist mental intrusion. They gave humans tribal instincts that made them fiercely protective of their communities. They gave humans the ability to tell stories, to pass knowledge from generation to generation without losing the core truth. And they gave humans a deep instinctive fear of things that did not belong in their reality. Every human culture had stories of monsters and demons, not because they were superstitious, but because they could sense the hollow's dreams pressing against their minds. The fear was a warning system, a reminder that something terrible lurked beneath their feet. The architects gave one final gift before they vanished: knowledge. They appeared to the first human shamans in visions and dreams. teaching them the truth about the Hollow and their purpose as guardians. They established rituals and traditions that would keep the knowledge alive. They created secret orders that would pass the torch from generation to generation. And then they were gone, leaving humanity alone with the most dangerous thing in the universe. Director Chun finished her story and looked at her stunned audience. Yennex could not speak. His mind was reeling with the implications of what he had heard. So all of human history, Kethvorin began. All of human history has been shaped by our purpose, Director Chun confirmed. Every religion, every mythology, every legend of heroes fighting monsters, all of it is connected to the Hollow. We fought wars because we are warriors by design. We built civilizations because we needed to be strong enough to fulfill our duty. Even our cruelty and our violence have a purpose. We had to be hard, to be resilient, to be capable of facing horrors that would break other species. But you also created beauty, Yennex said. Art, music, literature. Love and compassion and dreams of a better future. Director Chun smiled sadly. Yes, the architects gave us those things too. They knew that a species built only for war would eventually destroy itself. So they gave us reasons to live, to love, to hope. They made us monsters and artists, killers and dreamers, all at once. They made us human. The chamber trembled. The blue glow flickered. And somewhere in the heart of the prison, something stirred. It is getting worse, Director Chun said. The Hollow has been sleeping for billions of years. But even in sleep, it dreams. And its dreams have been growing darker. More aggressive. More focused. What changed? Yennex asked. We do not know for certain. Perhaps it sensed that the quarantine was weakening. Perhaps it knows that humans have grown stronger. Perhaps it simply reached a natural point in its cycle where it starts to wake up. Director Chun shook her head. Whatever the cause, the effect is clear. The Hollow is trying to break free, and it is closer to success than it has ever been before. What happens if it escapes? Kethvorin's voice was barely a whisper. It feeds. It starts with the minds closest to it, then reaches further and further. Every conscious being in the galaxy becomes food. Within a few centuries, every intelligent species would be devoured, their consciousness absorbed into the Hollow's endless hunger. Within a few thousand years, it would spread to other galaxies. Eventually, it would consume everything that thinks, everything that feels, everything that dreams. There would be no one left, Yennex said. There would be nothing left. Just the Hollow, alone in a universe of empty matter, forever hungry, forever unfilled. Director Chun looked back at the prison. That is what we have been fighting to prevent. That is why we stayed hidden, why we built our secret civilization, why we prepared for this day. Because we knew it would come eventually. We knew the sleeper would wake. A human officer approached, his face pale. Director, the readings are getting worse. The containment fields are at 70%. At this rate, we have maybe 3 days before they fail completely. 3 days, Director Chun repeated. Then we have 3 days to do what generations of Guardians could not. 3 days to end this forever. How? Yennex demanded. You said yourself that the architects could not destroy the Hollow. If beings that powerful failed, how can we succeed? Director Chun's eyes met his, and in them he saw something that surprised him. Not despair, not fear, hope. The architects could not destroy the Hollow because they still loved it. It was their creation, their child, twisted and terrible, but still theirs. They could not bring themselves to deliver the final blow. She paused. We do not have that weakness. We have spent 10,000 years preparing for this moment. We have developed weapons that the architects never imagined. We have trained warriors who can enter the Hollow's dreams and fight it in its own realm. We have studied its prison and found the weak points. The places where a carefully targeted strike could collapse the dimensional chains and scatter its consciousness across realities so vast that it could never reform. "You have a plan," Kethvorin said. "We have always had a plan. We just hoped we would never have to use it." Director Chun turned to her officer. "Begin the preparations. Activate all Guardian protocols. And send word to the fleet. Tell them the final operation begins now." The officer nodded and hurried away. Director Chun looked at Yennex and Kethvorin, her face set in grim determination. "You asked why we revealed ourselves after all this time. You asked why we needed help. The truth is, we do not need your ships or your weapons. What we need is witnesses. What we need is for someone to remember what happened here, to tell the story to the rest of the galaxy, to make sure that our sacrifice means something." Sacrifice? Yennex felt cold. The weapon that can destroy the Hollow must be delivered to its core. It must be detonated from inside the prison, inside its mind. There is no way to do that remotely. Someone has to carry it in. Director Chun's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "My family has guarded the vault for 300 generations. This duty has always been ours. And now it falls to me." Yennex wanted to argue. He wanted to say that there must be another way, that she was too valuable to sacrifice, that they could find a different solution. But he had been a soldier his entire life. He knew what duty looked like. He knew what sacrifice meant. "I understand," he said instead. "And I will make sure your story is told. The galaxy will know what humanity did for them. They will know the price you paid." Director Chun nodded. "Thank you, Admiral. That is all we ask." The chamber trembled again, more violently this time. The machines around the prison screamed with effort, struggling to hold back the thing that was slowly, inevitably waking up. The final battle was coming, and humanity was ready to fight. The first sign of disaster came from a colony 3,000 light years away. A mining station in the outer territories, home to 8,000 workers from a dozen different species, suddenly went silent. When rescue ships arrived, they found the inhabitants still at their posts, still breathing, still technically alive. But their minds were gone. Their eyes stared at nothing. Their mouths hung open, frozen in silent screams. Whatever had made them who they were had been drained away, leaving only empty shells. Admiral Yennex received the report on the Bridge of the Unbroken Will. He read it twice, then a third time, hoping he had misunderstood. He had not. "It is happening," he said to Kethvorin, who stood beside him. "The Hollow is reaching out." More reports followed. A diplomatic summit where every attendee suddenly collapsed into madness. A medical research station where scientists began killing each other with surgical tools. A passenger liner that flew directly into a star while the crew screamed in harmony across the conclave. Chaos erupted. No one understood what was happening. The official news channel spoke of a new plague, a mental virus that was spreading through unknown means. The military mobilized to contain the outbreaks, but how do you fight an enemy that attacks the mind from the inside? Yennex watched the reports pile up and felt helpless. He was a warrior, trained to face threats he could see and touch. This was something else entirely. This was like fighting smoke. "Director Chun warned us," Kethvorin said. "She said the Hollow would start with the minds closest to it, then reach further. It is extending its influence, testing its power. How far will it reach? According to the human estimates, it will eventually be able to touch every conscious mind in the galaxy. The only question is how long that takes." Yennex turned away from the reports. "Then we need to give the humans time. Whatever they are planning, they need time to do it." He began issuing orders. The Conclave fleet would establish a perimeter around Sol System. They would evacuate any remaining personnel from Earth. They would create a clear zone around the planet so that the humans could work without distraction. It was not much. It was almost nothing compared to the scale of the threat. But it was what he could do. On Earth, Director Chun was preparing for war. The vault had been transformed. The ancient chamber now bustled with activity as thousands of humans worked on machines and devices that Yenix could not comprehend. Some of the machines were clearly weapons, vast arrays that hummed with barely contained energy. Others seemed to be medical equipment, pods and chairs designed to hold human bodies while doing something to their minds. Director Chun stood at the center of it all, giving orders with calm precision. She had not slept in 5 days. She did not need to. Her body was enhanced with technology that pushed it beyond normal limits. She could stay awake for weeks if necessary, and it was necessary. The containment fields around the Hollow's prison were failing faster than predicted. They had days, perhaps hours, before the ancient chains would snap completely. "The psychic warriors are ready," reported a young officer. 10,000 volunteers, all trained for exactly this mission. "They are entering the pods now." Director Chun nodded. "Good. Begin the synchronization process." The pods hummed to life. Inside them, 10,000 humans closed their eyes and let their consciousness slip free from their bodies. They had trained their entire lives for this moment, learning to project their minds into realms that most species could not even perceive. They were dreamwalkers, ghost soldiers, warriors of the mind, and now they would enter the Hollow's own territory. They would fight it in its dreams. The psychic warriors found themselves in a landscape that defied description. It was not a place in any physical sense. It was a state of being, a dimension of pure thought and emotion. The ground beneath their feet was made of memories. The sky above was woven from nightmares. And everywhere, pressing in from all sides, was the presence of the Hollow. It knew they were there. It had always known. And it was amused. The first wave of warriors died in seconds. The Hollow crushed their consciousness like insects, absorbing their minds into its endless hunger. They did not scream. They did not fight. They simply ceased to exist. But more warriors came. And these were ready. They carried weapons forged from human determination, shields built from human hope. They fought with tactics developed over generations of study, strategies designed to confuse and weaken an entity that had existed since before time began. The Hollow had never faced anything like this before. Its prey had always been passive, unable to resist its power. But humans were different. Humans were designed to fight. Humans were stubborn and fierce and utterly unwilling to surrender. The battle raged across realities. Warriors fell by the hundreds, then by the thousands. But for everyone who died, 2 more took their place. The Hollow was vast, but humanity was relentless. Slowly, impossibly, the warriors began to push forward, back in the physical world. Admiral Yenix watched the battle unfold on screens that showed things his mind could barely process. He saw human bodies lying in pods, their vital signs fluctuating wildly. He saw readings that measured something called psychic coherence, dropping and spiking and dropping again. He saw numbers that represented lives, thousands of lives, flickering and going dark. "They are dying," he said to Kethvorin. "So many of them." "They knew the cost," the ambassador replied. "They accepted it." Director Chun approached them. She was wearing a suit of armor that seemed to be made of light itself. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with a fire that Yenix recognized. It was the look of someone who had made peace with death. "Admiral, Ambassador, I wanted to say goodbye before I leave." Yenix felt his heart clench. "There must be another way. Surely you can send someone else." "The weapon requires someone who understands the Hollow completely. My family has studied it for 300 generations. I know its structure, its weaknesses, its dreams. I am the only one who can find the exact point to strike." She smiled, and it was surprisingly gentle. "Do not mourn me, Admiral. I have lived my entire life for this moment. There is no greater honor than to fulfill your purpose." She turned to Kethforn. "You asked, when we first met, why humanity chose isolation. Why we gave up our place in the galactic community to guard a prison that no one knew existed. I remember. The answer is simple. We did it because it was right. Not because we expected thanks or reward. Not because we wanted power or glory. We did it because someone had to, and we were the ones who could. Our eyes were bright with unshed tears. That is what it means to be human. We carry burdens that are too heavy. We fight battles that cannot be won. We sacrifice ourselves for strangers who will never know our names. And we do it gladly because we know that the alternative is unthinkable." She clasped hands with both of them, her grip surprisingly strong. "Tell the galaxy our story. Not to make us heroes, but to remind them that heroes are possible. That duty exists. That some things are worth dying for." "I will," Yenix promised. "I swear on my honor, I will." Director Chen nodded, then turned and walked toward a pod that was larger and more complex than the others. She climbed inside and lay back on the cushioned surface. Medical technicians attached sensors to her skin. The weapon, a small device that glowed with impossible colors, was placed in her hands. "Beginning final descent," she said. "All warriors, clear a path. I am coming through." The pod closed around her. The lights flickered, and Director Amara Chen, the last guardian of the vault, entered the dreamscape of the Hollow. What followed was not a battle in any ordinary sense. It was a war of wills, a clash between human determination and cosmic hunger. Director Chen moved through landscapes of terror and beauty, fighting through waves of corrupted thought, pushing ever deeper into the heart of the ancient monster. The psychic warriors who still survived formed a living shield around her. They died in waves, their consciousness scattered across the void, but they never stopped protecting their leader. They were the spear, and she was the point. The Hollow tried everything to stop them. It sent memories of loved ones, pleading for mercy. It created illusions of safety and peace. It offered power, knowledge, immortality. Anything they desired, if only they would stop fighting. But the humans did not stop. They could not stop. They had been designed for exactly this purpose, and 10,000 years of preparation had made them perfect. Director Chen reached the core. It was a place beyond description, a singularity of consciousness where the Hollow's true self resided. Here, the entity was most powerful but also most vulnerable. Here, its dimensional anchors were concentrated. Here, a single perfectly placed strike could shatter the chains that bound it to reality. The Hollow noticed her. For the first time since the battle began, it focused all of its attention on a single human. And it spoke. The voice was not sound. It was pure thought pressed directly into Chun's mind. It was ancient and cold and terribly, terribly patient. "You cannot kill what was here before time began. I am not imprisoned. I am waiting." Chun did not hesitate. She raised the weapon and began the activation sequence. "Waiting for what?" she asked. "For the universe to ripen. For consciousness to spread and grow and multiply. When I was first imprisoned, there were only a few scattered civilizations. Now there are thousands. Trillions upon trillions of minds, all ready to be harvested. Your galaxy is no longer a garden. It is a feast." The weapon hummed in her hands, building toward critical mass. "And your architects knew this would happen. They knew that by seeding life across the cosmos, they were growing food for me. They could not destroy me because they needed me. Without hunger, there is no growth. Without fear, there is no courage. I am the darkness that makes your light possible. Kill me, and you kill the purpose of all existence." Chun looked at the entity that had haunted her species for billions of years. She thought of all the warriors who had died to bring her here. She thought of the galaxy outside, where millions were already suffering because of this creature's influence. "You may be right," she said. "Maybe darkness is necessary. Maybe fear drives growth. But there is a difference between fear and extinction. There is a difference between challenge and annihilation." She raised the weapon higher. It was fully charged now, ready to release energy that existed in dimensions. The hollow could not escape. "You have waited long enough, and we are done being afraid." She pressed the activation trigger. The hollow screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard with ears. It was a vibration that shook every level of reality, a cry of rage and pain and something that might have been surprise. The ancient entity had expected many things, but it had not expected a single human to look into its core and smile. The weapon detonated. Reality stuttered. The dreamscape collapsed. Every conscious being in the galaxy felt a moment of terrible pressure, as if something vast was pressing down on them. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure vanished. In the vault beneath Earth, the prison that had held the hollow for billions of years began to dissolve. But the thing inside was no longer there. Its consciousness had been shattered, scattered across dimensional rifts so vast that the pieces could never find each other again. It would take billions of years to reform, if it ever could. Director Chun felt herself falling. The weapon had done its job, but it had taken everything from her. Her consciousness was unraveling, spreading thin across the void. She could not return to her body. She could not survive. But she was not afraid. As darkness took her, she thought of her ancestors, all 300 generations who have prepared for this moment. She thought of her people, who would finally be free to live without the burden of guardianship. She thought of the galaxy, which would never know how close it had come to extinction. She thought of hope. And then she was gone. In the command center of the human flagship, alarms fell silent. The screens that had shown chaos and battle now showed peaceful emptiness. The containment fields, which had been failing moments before, now held nothing but empty space. A technician looked up, tears streaming down his face. "It is done. The hollow is gone. We won." The humans in the room did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They bowed their heads in silence, honoring the 10,000 warriors who had given everything, and the woman who had struck the final blow. Admiral Yenix stood among them, his own eyes wet with something that might have been tears. He thought of Director Chun, of her fierce determination and her gentle smile. He thought of her final words about duty and sacrifice and the things that make heroism possible. He would remember. He would make sure everyone remembered. The battle was over. The war was won. But the cost had been almost too high to bear. We have always assumed that we are the masters of the galaxy, that our technology and our civilization make us superior to all others. But humanity has shown us that we are not masters. We are children, playing in a garden while our parents stand guard against wolves in the darkness. Yenix's voice grew stronger. There are other guardians out there, other species that we dismissed as primitive, as unimportant. Some of them may be protecting us from dangers we cannot even imagine. And we have been ignoring them, forgetting them, leaving them to carry their burdens alone. What do you propose? I propose that we change. That we stop looking at forgotten worlds as navigation hazards and start seeing them as potential allies. That we develop new protocols for encountering isolated species. That we ask questions before we make assumptions. Yenix paused. Humanity did not ask for our help. They did not need our help. But they welcomed us when we came. Perhaps other guardians will do the same if we approach them with respect. The council debated for days. Factions formed and dissolved. Old prejudices clashed with new understanding. But in the end, they agreed to Admiral Yenix's proposal. A new branch of the Conclave would be formed, dedicated to seeking out and supporting guardian species across the galaxy. It would be led by a joint human conclave team, combining human knowledge with galactic resources. When the vote was announced, Samir Okonkwo appeared on the main screen. He had been watching the proceedings from Earth, waiting to see how the conclave would respond. Director Okonkwo, the speaker said, "The conclave hereby offers humanity full membership in our community. We offer you resources, technology, and the gratitude of 12,000 star systems. Will you accept?" Samir smiled. "I thank you for the offer, Speaker. But humanity must decline." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the council. "We do not decline out of pride or arrogance," Samir continued. "We decline because our work is not finished. There are other guardians who need us. There are other sleepers who will one day wake. Our purpose is not to rule or to join. Our purpose is to protect. Then, what do you propose? An alliance. Not membership, but partnership. We will share what we know about the architects and the sleepers. We will help train teams to seek out the other guardians. We will stand ready to assist when the next crisis comes. But we will not become part of your political system. We must remain free to act when action is needed." The speaker considered this for a long moment. "And if we need you? If another threat emerges that we cannot face alone?" Samir's smile faded into something more solemn. "Then call us. Send word to Sol System. And we will come. We will always come. That is our promise, the same promise we made to the architects 10,000 years ago. We are the guardians. We do not abandon those we protect." The alliance was formed. It was not the relationship the conclave had hoped for, but it was better than anyone had expected. Humanity would remain independent, but they would also remain connected. Two civilizations, once separated by fear and secrets, now united by shared purpose. In the months that followed, expeditions began to launch. Human scouts, paired with conclave diplomats, traveled to worlds that had been marked as quarantine zones or navigation hazards. They approached carefully, respectfully, always ready to retreat if unwelcome. On some worlds, they found nothing. The sleepers had died long ago, or escaped, or simply never existed. But on others, they found exactly what they were looking for. On a frozen moon orbiting a dying star, they found a species of crystalline beings who had guarded an icebound horror for 500,000 years. The beings were surprised to have visitors. They were more surprised to learn that they were not alone. On a jungle world at the edge of the galaxy, they found a civilization of plant-based life forms who communicated through chemical signals. They had been fighting a slow war against something buried deep in their planet's core for 3,000 generations. They had been winning, but only barely. They welcomed the help. On a dozen other worlds, the story repeated. Guardian species who had carried their burdens in isolation, never knowing that others shared their fate. Some were advanced, with technology that rivaled humanity's. Others were still using stone tools. But all of them had the same thing in common. They had been chosen, just as humanity had been chosen. They had been given a duty, and they had not failed. Admiral Yenix retired from military service a year after the crisis ended. He spent his remaining years writing a history of what he had witnessed, a book that would become required reading for every diplomat and explorer in the conclave. The book ended with a message that he had learned from Director Chun. The universe is vast and old and full of terrors, beyond our imagination. But it is also full of guardians. On forgotten worlds, in hidden corners of the galaxy, there are species who have dedicated themselves to protecting life from the darkness. They do not ask for thanks. They do not seek glory. They simply stand watch, generation after generation, waiting for the moment when they will be needed. We thought we were alone in the universe. We were wrong. We thought we were masters of our fate. We were wrong about that too. But we have learned a new truth, one that makes all the difference. Hope is not a thing we carry alone. It is a torch that passes from hand to hand, from species to species, across time and space. As long as someone is willing to stand against the darkness, the light endures. The humans taught us this. And now, with them at our side, we will teach others. The Guardians are waking, and the galaxy will never be alone again. On 100 worlds, across 1,000 light years, beings looked up at the stars. Some of them had always known they were guardians. Others had just learned the truth. But all of them felt something they had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The humans were coming. The humans were ready to help. And together, they would face whatever darkness still waited in the depths of the universe. The story of humanity was no longer one of isolation and sacrifice. It was a story of connection and purpose. It was a story that was just beginning. And somewhere, in the endless void between galaxies, the scattered remnants of the hollow drifted further and further apart. It could not think. It could not plan. It could barely remember what it had once been. But deep in its shattered consciousness, a single ember of awareness still flickered. Not destroyed. Not quite. Waiting. But that was a story for another time. For now, the Guardians stood ready. For now, the light held back the darkness. For now, that was enough.